The pool water was blood red under the emergency lights, and Karen's screams echoed through the night as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. What started as her demanding I refill my pool had spiraled into something none of us saw coming. 20-year secret buried beneath my backyard, a missing person case that had gone cold. And the moment when Karen's entitled crusade for property values became the key that unlocked a truth about our quiet suburban street. The sound of Karen Mitchell's heels clicking against the concrete should have been warning enough. David Chen paused mid-stroke as he scraped algae from the bottom of his empty pool. Months without running the filtration system had turned the shallow remaining water into a green, stagnant mess that smelled like rotting vegetation. David Chen. Karen's voice cut through the air like a blade. "We need to talk now." He straightened slowly, every muscle in his back protesting the movement. Karen stood at the edge of his property line, her arms crossed over her pristine white blazer, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her angular face look even sharper. "Morning, Karen," David said, setting down his scraper. "What can I do for you?" "You can fill that eyesore of a pool. For starters," she gestured dramatically at the concrete basin. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to our property values? The Hendersons are trying to sell, and potential buyers are asking questions about the neighborhood maintenance standards." David wiped his hands on his jeans, fighting the urge to tell her exactly what he thought about her property value concerns. "The pool's been having some issues. I'm working on it. Working on it." Karen's laugh was cold and sharp. "Been 3 months. 3 months of looking at this. This swamp in your backyard. The HOA has standards, and you're violating at least 6 different clauses in our covenant." "I'm not part of the HOA," David reminded her, his voice steady despite the irritation building in his chest. 15 years. Karen's eyes narrowed. "That's a technicality, and you know it. You have a responsibility to the community. To the people who chose to live here because of the standards we maintain, the only responsibility I have is to keep my property legal and safe." David picked up his scraper again, hoping the conversation would end there. It didn't. Legal and safe. Karen stepped closer, her voice rising. "That stagnant water is a breeding ground for mosquitoes. It's probably harboring West Nile virus. And the smell got David. Can you smell that? It's affecting the entire block." David turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made Karen take a half step back. Her phone, scrolling through what looked like a long list of notes. "I've been documenting this situation for weeks. Photos, smell reports, complaints from neighbors. The city has ordinances about maintaining pools, and I'm prepared to file a formal complaint if you don't have this filled and properly maintained within the next week. You've been documenting my pool. Someone has to." Karen's chin lifted. Defiantly, when reasonable requests are ignored, documentation becomes necessary. "This isn't just about you anymore, David. This is about the entire neighborhood's reputation." David set down his scraper with deliberate care. "Karen, I'm going to say this once. If you don't like looking at it, install a taller fence." "A taller fence?" Karen's voice pitched higher. "I shouldn't have to spend thousands of dollars. Fill the pool, David. It's not a request. Actually, it is." David's voice carried a warning edge that made Karen's eyes flash with anger. "And my answer is no." "Perfume mixing with the stagnant pool water? Did you just tell me no?" "I told you no." For a moment, they stood in silence, the tension crackling between them like electricity before a storm. A bead of sweat rolled down David's temple, and he could hear the distant sound of a lawnmower from somewhere in the development. "You're making a mistake," Karen said finally, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Neighborly, but you clearly don't understand civility. Fine, we'll do this the hard way." She turned and stalked back toward her house, her heels clicking rapidly against the pavement. David watched her go, noting the way she pulled out her phone before she'd even reached her front door. Just great. The truth was, David couldn't afford to fill and maintain the pool properly. The divorce had wiped out most of his savings, and the monthly payments to Sharon left him with barely enough to cover the mortgage and utilities. The pool had been Sharon's idea symbol of their success. She'd called it. Now it was just another reminder of everything that had fallen apart. He knelt beside the deep end, where the water was clearest, and resumed scraping. The algae came off in long, slimy ribbons that floated to the surface. Each stroke revealed more of the pool's original blue tiles, a cheerful color that seemed out of place in the current mess. The sound of a car door slamming made him look up. A blue sedan had pulled into Karen's driveway, and a man in a suit was getting out. David recognized him as Brad Mitchell, Karen's husband, home early from his real estate office. Even from a distance, David could see the tense set of Brad's shoulders as Karen met him at the front door. Their voices carried across the yard, though David couldn't make out the words. Karen's gestures were sharp and angry, her finger pointing repeatedly in David's direction. Brad nodded, his face grim, and disappeared into the house, back to his scraping, but his movements were more aggressive now. The metal tool scraped against the concrete with harsh, grating sounds that seemed to echo his frustration. He'd moved to Willowbrook specifically to get away from this kind of neighborhood drama. The house had been a Stila 1980s ranch, on a large lot that hadn't been incorporated into the fancy development that had grown up around it. He'd thought the distance from other houses would give him privacy and peace. He should have known. Better, the sound of multiple car doors slamming made him look up again. This time, there were 3 cars in Karen's driveway: Brad's sedan, Karen's white BMW, and a black pickup truck David didn't recognize. Through the Mitchell's front window, he could see silhouettes moving around, and the animated gestures suggested a heated discussion. David's phone buzzed. A text from his daughter Emma. "Dad, can you pick me up from soccer practice at 6? Mom's working late again." He glanced at his watch. Emma needed him. The pool might not be pristine, but at least it wouldn't look like a swamp. Another car door slammed, and David looked up to see a woman in a navy blue suit getting out of a white SUV. She walked directly to Karen's front door, carrying a clipboard and what looked like a camera. David's stomach tightened. That looked official. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Chen. This is Rebecca Torres from the City Planning Department. I'm calling about a complaint we received regarding a pool on your property." David closed his eyes. "What kind of complaint?" "We've received reports that you're maintaining a pool in violation of city ordinances regarding stagnant water and potential health hazards. I'm actually in your neighborhood right now, and I'd like to schedule a time to inspect the property." "You're in my neighborhood?" "Yes, sir. I'm currently at 1247 Maple Street, speaking with the complainant. Would now be a convenient time for the inspection." David looked across the yard at Karen's house, where the woman with the clipboard was now visible through the front window. "The complainant is Mrs. Mitchell. I can't discuss the details of who filed the complaint, sir, but I can tell you that we take these matters seriously. Pool maintenance violations can result in fines of up to $500 per day." "Per day?" "Yes, sir. The city ordinance is quite clear about maintaining pools in a sanitary condition. Stagnant water poses health risks to the entire community." David's grip tightened on the phone. "I understand, sir, but the complaint alleges that the pool has been in this condition for several months. Would you be available for an inspection now?" Through Karen's window, David could see her talking animatedly to the inspector, her hands gesturing toward his property. Even from this distance, he could see the satisfaction in her posture. "Mr. Chen, are you there?" "Yes," David said. "I'm here." So would now work for the inspection. Scattered around the deck, at the 3 months of neglect that had turned Sharon's dream into his nightmare, "Mr. Chen." "Yeah," David said finally. "Now works fine." Through the window, he could see Karen watching, her phone pressed to her ear. The other cars were still in her driveway, and David had the distinct feeling that this was just the beginning. The first police cruiser arrived within minutes, followed by another. Then an unmarked sedan that David somehow knew carried detectives. The sirens cut off abruptly, leaving an eerie silence that seemed to amplify every sound: the slam of car doors, the crackle of police radios, the rapid click of Karen's heels as she hurried toward the officers. Detective Maria Santos emerged from the unmarked car, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her sharp eyes already scanning the scene. Behind her, Detective James Murphy, a heavy-set man with graying temples, pulled out a notebook and began writing before he'd even reached David's property line. "Mr. Chen." Detective Santos approached the pool area, her voice calm but authoritative. "I'm Detective Santos. This is Detective Murphy. We received a call about a possible ... discovery." David stood slowly, his legs unsteady. The phone he'd dropped was still sitting in the shallow water, and he could see Karen standing at the edge of his yard, surrounded by 3 uniformed officers who seemed to be taking her statement. "I was cleaning the pool," David said, his voice sounding strange and distant to his own ears. "Some tiles came loose, and underneath, ... He gestured helplessly at the exposed concrete. Detective Santos moved closer, her expression carefully neutral. "Can you show me exactly what you found?" David led her to the deep end, where the human-shaped staining was most visible. In the harsh afternoon sunlight, it looked even more disturbing, a dark silhouette that seemed to have been seared into the concrete itself. "Jesus," Detective Murphy whispered, pulling out his phone to take photos. "How long have you lived here, Mr. Chen?" 15 years. We bought the house in 2010, right after we got married." David's voice caught slightly. "My ex-wife and we're divorced now, and the pool, we had it installed in 2012, hired a company called Clearwater Pools. They did the excavation, the concrete work, everything." Detective Santos knelt beside the pool, her trained eyes taking in every detail. "Mr. Chen, I need you to think carefully. During the installation process, did you notice anything unusual? Any delays? Any problems with the concrete work?" David tried to remember. The pool installation had been Sharon's project she'd handled. All the permits, the contractor meetings, the inspections. He'd been working 60-hour weeks at the engineering firm, trying to make partner. "There was a delay," he said suddenly. "About a week. The contractor said they had to redo some of the concrete work because of, what did he call it? Settling issues. The concrete hadn't cured properly. Do you remember who was on the crew?" The owner was Frank Clearwater. Nice guy, seemed professional, but most of the work was done by his crew chief, a guy named... David's brow furrowed. Tony Martinez, I think." Detective Murphy looked up from his notebook. "You think I'm sorry it was 13 years ago? I wasn't paying close attention to the details. We'll need to track down these contractors." Detective Santos said to her partner, "See if Clearwater Pools is still in business." A commotion from the street made them all turn. A white van with Channel 7 News emblazoned on the side had pulled up, and a reporter was climbing out with a cameraman in tow. Karen was already walking toward them, her posture straightening as she prepared to be interviewed. "Shit," Detective Murphy muttered. "How did they get here so fast? Probably monitoring police scanners." Detective Santos replied, "Mr. Chen, we're going to need to secure this area. You'll need to stay away from the pool until our forensics team can process the scene." David nodded, watching as Karen positioned herself in front of the news camera. Even from this distance, he could see her animated gestures, her mouth moving rapidly as she spoke to the reporter. Detective Santos, a young uniformed officer, approached. "We've got the neighbor who called it in. She says she has some additional information. About the pool, about the property. She says there might be records of what was here before the house was built." Detective Santos looked at David. "Mr. Chen, what do you know about the history of this land?" "Not much. When we bought the house, it was just a vacant lot. The previous owner was an elderly man named what was his name? Weber. Walter Weber. He lived here for decades, apparently kept to himself." "Where is Mr. Weber now?" "Dead, I think. The realtor said he'd passed away and his estate was selling the property." Detective Murphy scribbled in his notebook. "We'll need to check property records, death certificates, see if there are any missing person reports from around the time the pool was installed." The forensics van arrived as they were talking, followed by the coroner's vehicle. David watched as technicians began setting up equipment, cordoning off the area with yellow tape that stretched from his house to the back fence. "Mr. Chen," Detective Santos said, "you're going to need to find somewhere else to stay tonight, probably for the next few days while we process the scene." "I have to pick up my daughter from soccer practice at 6:30. Where does she live?" "With her mother, my ex-wife, but she was supposed to stay with me this weekend." Detective Santos glanced at her watch. "It's almost 5 now. You should probably call her mother, explain the situation." David's stomach clenched. The thought of calling Sharon, of explaining that their former dream home had become a crime scene, made him feel sick. But there was no choice. "Can I get some things from the house first? An officer will escort you. Touch as little as possible." As they walked toward the house, David could hear Karen's voice carrying across the yard. Neighborhood has always been safe and family-friendly. This is absolutely shocking. We had no idea we were living next to a potential crime scene. Inside the house, everything looked normal and yet completely different. The furniture Sharon had left behind the couch they'd picked out together, the dining table where they'd eaten thousands of meals, seemed to belong to someone else's life. Officer Reynolds, a young woman with kind eyes, followed David as he gathered clothes, toiletries, and his laptop. "Where will you be staying?" she asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe a hotel." David paused in his bedroom doorway. "Officer, can I ask you something?" "Sure. In your experience, how long does something like this take? The investigation, I mean?" Officer Reynolds considered her answer carefully. "That depends on a lot of factors. If it's what we think it is, weeks, maybe months. The forensics work alone could take a long time, months." "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen. I know this is difficult." David's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, practice is running really late. Can you pick me up at 7? He typed back, "Honey, something's come up. I'm going to have Mom pick you up tonight. I'll explain later." Emma's response came immediately. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just a change of plans. Love you." Outside, the scene had transformed into a full-scale investigation. Crime scene tape fluttered in the evening breeze, and portable lights were being set up around the pool. David could see Detective Santos talking to a man in a white coat who must be the coroner. Karen was still being interviewed by the news crew, her voice carrying across the yard. ... Property values. Of course, but more importantly, the safety of our children. We have families in this neighborhood, and the thought that we've been living next to this for years. ... Mr. Chan. Detective Murphy approached him. "We've got a few more questions about the timeline when you had the pool installed." David set down his overnight bag. "Okay. You said the installation was in 2012. Can you be more specific?" "Summer of 2012. July, maybe August." "It was hot, I remember that. Sharon was excited about having it ready for Labor Day weekend. And the delay you mentioned, the concrete work that had to be redone. Do you remember what the contractor told you about it?" David closed his eyes, trying to remember. "He said there was a problem with the substrate. That's the word he used. Substrate. Said the ground wasn't stable enough for the concrete, and they had to dig deeper and add more gravel. How much deeper? I don't know. Frank handled all the technical stuff. I just wrote the checks. Detective Murphy made notes. We'll need to get in touch with your ex-wife. She might remember details." "You don't..." The thought of Sharon having to relive those happy memories in the context of a potential murder investigation made David's chest tighten. "She's not going to take this well. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen. I know this is difficult for everyone involved." A shout from the pool area made them all turn. One of the forensics technicians was waving Detective Santos over, excitement evident in his voice. "Detective, you need to see this." David watched as Detective Santos hurried to the pool, followed by the coroner and several other officials. They huddled around the deep end, their voices too low to hear, but their body language spoke volumes. "What do you think they found?" David asked. Detective Murphy studied the group at the pool. "Hard to say. Could be anything." After a few minutes, Detective Santos returned, her expression grim. "Mr. Chen, we're going to need to expand the search area. The forensics team wants to bring in ground-penetrating radar. Ground-penetrating radar. To check for other disturbances in the area. The pattern of discoloration suggests, well, it suggests that what we found might not be the only thing buried here." David felt the blood drain from his face. "You think there are more bodies? We don't know yet. But we need to be thorough." Karen's voice carried across the yard. By morning, Willowbrook had become a circus. News vans lined Maple Street, reporters clutched coffee cups and microphones, and neighbors emerged from their houses like cautious animals, drawn by curiosity but maintaining a careful distance from the yellow crime scene tape that now encompassed David's entire property. David sat in Sharon's small apartment kitchen, nursing his third cup of coffee, and watching the coverage on the local news. Emma had left for school with strict instructions to say nothing to her classmates, though David suspected that would be impossible. The story was everywhere. Double quotes, ... The quiet suburb of Willowbrook was rocked yesterday by the discovery of what police believed to be human remains in a residential pool. The homeowner, David Chen, made the grisly discovery while cleaning his pool. Dad Emma stood in the kitchen doorway, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her 17-year-old face creased with worry. "Are you going to be okay?" David looked at his daughter Saran's dark hair, his own stubborn chin, a perfect blend of both their best qualities. "I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. This isn't your fault, and it's not something you need to worry about. But what if people at school say things? What if they think?" "They can think whatever they want," David said firmly. "We know the truth. We had nothing to do with this." After Emma left, Sharon poured herself coffee and sat across from him at the small table. They'd barely spoken since the divorce was finalized 6 months ago, but crisis had a way of breaking down old barriers. "David, what are you going to do about the house?" I don't know," the detective said. "The investigation could take months. I can't go back there while it's a crime scene." "What about work?" David's stomach clenched. He'd already called in sick, but Peterson & Associates wasn't the kind of firm that tolerated extended absences, even for circumstances like this. "I'll figure it out." His phone rang. "Detective Santos." "Mr. Chen, we need you to come down to the station. We've got some new information, and we need to go over your statement again." "New information. We'll discuss it when you get here. Can you come in this morning?" 20 minutes later, David sat in a small interview room at the Willowbrook Police Department, facing Detective Santos and Detective Murphy across a metal table. A digital recorder sat between them, its red light blinking steadily. "Mr. Chen," Detective Santos began, "yesterday you told us that Tony Martinez was the crew chief for the pool installation. We've been looking into his background, and we've found some interesting connections." Inside were photocopies of newspaper clippings, police reports, and what looked like property records. Tony Martinez, whose real name appears to have been Antonio Morales, was involved in at least 3 other construction projects in this area between 1995 and 2012. Each time, he worked under a different contractor's license. David scanned the documents. 3 other projects: a patio installation in 2001, a basement renovation in 2007, and a swimming pool in 2011, all within a 10-mile radius of your house. Detective Murphy leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, did Tony ever mention any other jobs he was working on? Properties in the area?" "No, he barely talked to me at all. He dealt mostly with my ex-wife." "We'll need to speak with her as well," Detective Santos said. "But there's something else. Yesterday we spoke with Margaret Hendricks, the neighbor who knew Rebecca Martinez. She told us some things that put this case in a different light." She pulled out another set of documents. According to Mrs. Hendricks, Rebecca Martinez didn't just disappear in 1993. She was planning to leave. Tony, she'd been telling people that she was afraid of him. David's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Afraid of him how? She told Mrs. Hendricks that Tony had threatened her, said that if she ever tried to leave him, he'd make sure no one would ever find her. The interview room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. "Jesus, there's more." Mrs. Hendricks said that Rebecca had been keeping a journal, writing down everything Tony did, everything he said. She was building evidence for a divorce. Did they ever find the journal? No, but Mrs. Hendricks thinks Rebecca might have hidden it somewhere. Somewhere Tony wouldn't think to look. Detective Murphy pulled out a photograph. "Mr. Chen, do you recognize this woman?" The photo showed a young Hispanic woman with kind eyes and long dark hair. She was smiling, standing in front of what looked like a small house with a garden in the background. "No, I don't think so. This is Rebecca Martinez." The photo was taken about 6 months before she disappeared. David studied the image. Rebecca looked happy, carefree. It was hard to believe that someone could look at that smile and decide to end it forever. "Mr. Chen," Detective Santos said, "we got the preliminary report from the forensics team this morning. The remains we found are definitely human, and based on the bone structure and dental work, they're consistent with a woman in her 20s or 30s. The time frame matches Rebecca's disappearance. So it's her we're waiting for. DNA confirmation, but yes, we believe so. There's something else, though. The ground-penetrating radar found anomalies in 2 other locations on your property." David felt his heart sink. "More bodies. We don't know yet. The anomalies could be anything: old septic systems, buried debris, root systems. But we need to investigate them. Where one near your back fence, close to the neighbor's property line. The other is under your driveway." "Under my driveway? The concrete appears to have been poured sometime in the mid-1990s, according to the building permits, but the radar shows a disturbance underneath that predates the concrete. David stared at the photograph. His driveway, the path he'd walked, every single day for 15 years, driving over whatever was buried beneath. "We'll need to excavate," Detective Murphy said. "Both locations. That means tearing up part of your driveway and potentially affecting your neighbor's yard." "Which neighbor?" "The Mitchells." David almost laughed. Of course. Karen's pristine backyard, her perfectly manicured lawn, her obsession with property values, all of it, was about to be torn apart by the very investigation she'd set in motion. How is Mrs. Mitchell taking the news? Detective Santos and Detective Murphy exchanged glances. "That's actually something else we need to discuss with you, Mr. Chen. Mrs. Mitchell has been very active in her media coverage of this case." She pulled out a tablet and played a video from that morning's news. Karen stood in front of her house, looking perfectly composed despite the chaos around her. "This is absolutely devastating for our community," Karen was saying. "Property values will be affected, of course, but more importantly, we need to know if there are other victims, other families who never got closure." The reporter leaned forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, you were the one who initially complained about Mr. Chen's pool. Do you feel any responsibility for this discovery?" Karen's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something that might have been guilt crossing her face. "Was simply trying to maintain community standards. I had no way of knowing that Mr. Chen's negligence would lead to the discovery of a crime scene that's been hidden for decades." "Negligence?" David said, his voice sharp. Detective Santos paused. "The video? She's been giving interviews all morning. Channel 7, Channel 3, 2 radio stations, and the Daily Herald. She's positioning herself as a hero who uncovered a decades-old murder. That's not what happened. We know that, Mr. Chen. But public perception can be tricky, and there's something else you need to know." She pulled out another document. "Mrs. Mitchell has filed a formal complaint with the city, claiming that your property poses a health hazard to the neighborhood. She's demanding that the city condemn the house and force you to demolish it." David felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Condemn it." She's arguing that the house was built over a crime scene, that the soil is contaminated with human remains, and that it poses an ongoing danger to the community. Can she do that? "It's complicated," Detective Murphy said. "Technically, if human remains are found on a property, there can be environmental and health concerns. But in this case, since you had no knowledge of the remains when you bought the house, the law is murky," Detective Santos finished. "That's why we suggested you get a lawyer." David's phone buzzed with a text from Sharon. "Emma's school is asking questions. The principal wants to meet with us." He showed the text to the detectives. "This is affecting my daughter now." "Mr. Chen," Detective Santos said gently, "this is going to get worse before it gets better. The media attention, the investigation, the potential civil litigation, it's all going to take time to resolve. How much time? Months, at minimum, if we find more remains, if the case goes to trial, trial. But Tony Martinez is dead. There might be accomplices, other people who knew about the murders and helped cover them up. And there's still the question of whether Tony was working alone." Detective Murphy leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Chen, when Tony's crew was working on your pool, do you remember how many people were involved?" "I don't know. 3 or 4 guys, maybe. Like I said, I wasn't paying close attention." "Do you remember any names? Anyone besides Tony?" Closed his eyes, trying to remember. "There was a young guy, maybe in his twee."